Also with me now to discuss global affairs analyst Michael Bociurkiw. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, a former spokesperson for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Good to have you here. You know, as we look at where things stand, it's remarkable to me that even in these meetings today, you see Steve Witkoff in there alone. What does that tell you about the American position?
Hey, good to be with you, Erica. Yeah, it's very interesting. He was there alone. We know very little of what happened. And he was also filmed on a kind of walking tour of Moscow, looking at possible business propositions there for himself and for Mr. Trump. That was very interesting. But Erica, I think we've seen a transition here from Trump 1.0, where there was a lot of tantrum diplomacy, as I once put it on CNN Opinion, to Trump 2.0, where it's pitbull diplomacy. Mr. Trump, who has a very well-known short attention span, seems to suddenly rush into this wanting a deal. Now, I was at a talk last night where a lot of people here in London asked, is it Mr. Trump gunning for the Nobel Peace Prize, or is he genuinely interested in peace? I think it's more on the side of Trump wanting to secure a very elusive foreign affairs win. Hasn't had one in Gaza nor in the Ukraine-Russia war. So I think that accounts for some of the rush here and of course, some of the secrecy as well.
Looking for that win, but also perhaps looking for that win in a way that comes with praise from Vladimir Putin. And I ask that question only because what is striking to me, as we've seen, is the number of concessions seemingly when it comes to Russia.
Yeah.
You know, as Alex just pointed out, when the president was asked yesterday in the Oval Office, what is Russia conceding? The fact that the answer was they're going to stop fighting and not take over the entirety of Ukraine. I mean, that gave a number of people around the world pause for good reason.
Absolutely. And I can tell you here in the United Kingdom and in Europe, chills going back down the spines of leaders here for that big concession. It can never be accepted. It's seen here as betrayal of everything that Western democracies stand for, and what kind of signal does it send out to other autocrats. But I think with Mr. Putin, the kind of chemistry there between Putin and Trump is Mr. Trump looks up to him and he's willing to give him a lot of concessions. We're now assuming that it won't be only Crimea, it will be lifting of sanctions, it will be freezing of the lines where they are right now, which will grant Russia 20%, more or less, of Ukrainian territory. There's even talk, Erica, of handing over the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to the Americans so they can generate electricity for both Ukraine and Russia. A lot of things stacked up here that at the end of the day are tilted very much against Ukraine.
It's also, when we look at the Crimea question, right, this would, of course, reverse, right, the position of the long-held position of the U.S. when it comes to Crimea, potentially violating international law, certainly violating international norms, if you will. I mean, there's the practical matter of the fact that this can't really happen in Ukraine. If the U.S., though, were to say, well, we're going to recognize Crimea as being Russian, and Russia's going to recognize it that way, even if everybody else doesn't, practically speaking, how does that really work? Is this like renaming the Gulf of Mexico?
Worse. And how would it work? I mean, I'm headed to Canada next, my home country. How would it work if they tried to annex Canada? I think there's a little bit of precedent here. You know, I would encourage the Trump team to read some history books. If we go back to when, you know, in the 1940s, when Russia occupied the three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, not to get too nerdy on you, but there was an acting Secretary of State, Summer Wells, and he put together a declaration that says, we're going to recognize the sovereignty, the independence of these occupied states for as long as it takes. And that lasted for 5+ decades. And it's important because it protected the assets of these states overseas. It gave people more rights to travel, that sort of thing. So I think if they employed a little bit of diplomatic creativity here, they could do something along those lines. But again, the Trump team seems in such a rush that that may not happen. And again, it's very, very sensitive in Ukraine, handing over a very, very important piece of illegally annexed Ukrainian territory to the Russians.
There's also the reality that for Vladimir Zelensky, this is a tough relationship, right, with Donald Trump. What are you seeing in terms of recent steps from the Ukrainian side that are either helping or hurting their case with the president?
Yeah, interesting question, you know, because I'm seeing some cracks in the kind of political unity that we've had for quite some time. And I'm referring especially to Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, who gave quite the news-breaking interview to another broadcaster today, saying that, yeah, perhaps Ukraine can temporarily give up some territory in return for peace. That's off message from the Zelensky team. That is, Klitschko is a political opponent of Zelensky. Zelensky is spending a lot of time away from Ukraine. So the cracks like that are happening. And one more quick thing that I think is very important is a lot of Ukrainians I have spoken to actually have not written off Crimea, but they recognize that it won't come back. And as your colleagues pointed out, Russia is hammering Ukrainian cities and villages very, very hard. The desire for a long-lasting peace is getting more and more. So very, very tough political shifting sands for Mr. Zelensky.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important to pay attention in the days and the weeks ahead. Michael, really appreciate your insight and your expertise. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.